Welcome to Secrets of the Past. This is the Korean War in 5 minutes. The Korean War was fought between North Korea and South Korea from 1950 to 1953. The conflict began on the 25th of June 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea following border skirmishes and rebellions in South Korea. North Korea was backed by China and the Soviet Union, while South Korea was backed by the United States and its allies. On the 27th of July 1953, the conflict came to an end with an armistice. Imperial Japan seized Korea in 1910 and governed it for 35 years until its surrender on the 15th of August 1945 at the end of World War II. The United States and the Soviet Union separated Korea into two occupation zones along the 30th parallel. The northern zone was managed by the Soviets, while the southern zone was administered by the Americans. Because of the Cold War tensions, the occupied zones became two separate entities in 1948. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, a socialist state, was created in the north under the totalitarian communist leadership of Kim Il-sung, while the Republic of Korea, a capitalist state, was established in the south under the authoritarian autocratic leadership of Syngman Rhee. Both governments of the two new Korean states claimed to be Korea's sole legitimate government, and neither accepted the border as permanent. On the 25th of June 1950, North Korean military forces, the Korean People's Army, crossed the border and drove into South Korea. Joseph Stalin had repeatedly demanded that North Korea postpone the attack until he and Mao Zedong both gave their consent. The UN Security Council condemned North Korea's move as an invasion and approved the formation of the United Nations Command and the deployment of military forces to Korea to resist it. The Soviet Union was boycotting the UN for recognising Taiwan as China, and China on the mainland was not recognised by the UN, therefore neither could support their partner in North Korea at the Security Council meeting. 21 countries eventually contributed to the UN force, with the United States supplying over 90% of the armed forces. After the first 2 months of the conflict, the South Korean army and the American forces deployed to Korea were on the verge of defeat. Retreating to a narrow region behind the Pusan perimeter, a daring and amphibious UN counteroffensive was undertaken at Incheon on September 1950, cutting off the KPA soldiers and supply lines in South Korea. Those who evaded encirclement and capture were compelled to return north. In October 1950, UN forces invaded North Korea and advanced rapidly towards the Yalu River, the boundary with China. But on the 19th of October 1950, Chinese forces of the People's Volunteer Army crossed the Yalu and entered the war. Following the first and second phase offensives, the UN withdrew from North Korea. By late December, Chinese soldiers had arrived in South Korea. Seoul was captured 4 times in these subsequent battles, and communist troops were forced back to positions around the 30th parallel, close to where the war began. Following this, the front stabilised, and for the final 2 years they were a war of attrition. The air war, on the other hand, was never a stalemate. The United States launched a huge bombing campaign against North Korea. For the first time in history, jet-powered fighters engaged in air-to-air combat, and Soviet pilots flew covertly in defence of their communist comrades. The fighting came to an end on the 27th of July 1953, when the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed. The agreement established the Korean Demilitarized Zone to separate North and South Korea, and to allow captives to be returned. However, no peace treaty was ever signed, and the two Koreas are still formally at war, although in a frozen conflict. North and South Korean officials met in the DMZ in April 2018 and agreed to work on a treaty to formally end the Korean War. With over 3 million military casualties and a higher relative civilian death toll than World War II or the Vietnam War, the Korean War was one of the most devastating conflicts of the modern period. It resulted in the devastation of nearly all Korea's main cities, thousands of killings by both sides, including the South Koreans' mass murdering of tens of thousands of suspected communists, and the North Koreans' torture and starving of prisoners of war. North Korea also became one of history's most extensively bombed countries. I hope you found this video enjoyable as well as educational. Make sure to check out our other videos on a range of historical matters. Thanks for watching.